October 21st, 1944. Mabalacat Airfield, Luzon, Philippines. The air smells of oil, damp earth, and cordite. It is still dark when the engines begin to turn over, one by one, then together, until the quiet countryside is swallowed by a low, vibrating roar. Mechanics move quickly along the flight line, tightening bolts, checking fuel lines, avoiding eye contact. No one lingers. No one jokes. Second Lieutenant Yukio Seki stands beside his aircraft and waits. The plane is a Mitsubishi A6M0, but it is no longer the fighter he once trusted with his life. A single bomb, heavy, blunt, final, has been bolted beneath the fuselage. The extra weight drags the nose down, forcing the landing gear to groan under the strain. There is no drop tank, no radio check for the return trip. There will be no return trip. Seki adjusts his gloves slowly, methodically. He is 23 years old, recently married, trained as a fighter pilot, not as this. His face is calm, but his jaw tightens as he listens to the briefing. A naval officer steps forward, voice controlled, professional. The enemy carrier group is east of Leyte. Fly low. Avoid radar detection as long as possible. When you sight your target, strike without hesitation. No mention of landing procedures. No emergency contingencies. The silence afterward says everything. Around Seki, other pilots nod. Some swallow hard. One whispers a prayer under his breath. Another stares at the ground, as if committing the texture of it to memory. Beyond the airfield, the distant thunder of naval guns rolls in from the east. The Battle of Leyte Gulf has begun, and Japan is already losing it. Just weeks earlier, this moment would have been unthinkable. For years, Japan's air strategy had relied on skill, initiative, and the unmatched maneuverability of pilots like Seki. But by late 1944, those advantages had evaporated. American aircraft now dominated the sky, faster, tougher, guided by radar, flown by pilots who rotated home to train others instead of dying in place. Every engagement cost Japan pilots it could not replace. Every loss cut deeper than the last. Leyte was supposed to be a gamble, one decisive fleet action that might disrupt the American advance through the Philippines. Instead, it became proof of something far worse. Japan no longer controlled the air. It barely contested it. Inside a nearby operations hut, Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi studies a map lit by a single bulb. Red markers crowd the waters around Leyte. American carriers, cruisers, destroyers. Blue markers, representing Japanese air units, are fewer. Many have already been crossed out. Onishi removes his glasses and rubs his eyes. He is not known as a fanatic. He is not impulsive. He understands numbers, logistics, probability, and the numbers are merciless. Conventional air attacks are failing. Bombers are being intercepted long before reaching their targets. Fighters are being chewed apart by disciplined American formations. Every sortie consumes fuel Japan can barely refine, flown by pilots Japan cannot afford to lose. The war has reached a point where traditional strategy no longer applies. Onishi turns to the officers around him. There is one method left, he says quietly. No one asks what he means. They already know. Back on the flight line, Seki climbs into his cockpit. The metal is cold beneath his gloves. He straps in, checks the instruments, airspeed, altitude, engine temperature, habits drilled into him over years of training. Muscle memory is a comfort. It keeps the mind from wandering, but the mind wanders anyway. He thinks of his wife, of unfinished letters folded into his flight suit, of the knowledge that this mission is not an act of sudden madness, but a deliberate order issued by men who understand exactly what they're asking. The engine surges to full power. A flare arcs into the sky. The first Zero races down the runway and lifts into the darkness. Another follows, then another. Seki's turn. As his wheels leave the ground, the Philippines fall away beneath him. Palm trees blur. The ocean stretches out ahead, black and endless. Below him, American radar operators are already watching faint signals appear on their screens. Unusual signals. Low, fast, direct. At wave-top height, Seki levels out. The sea rushes past so close it feels as if he could touch it. This is deliberate. Flying low keeps him hidden. Longer. Long enough, perhaps, to reach the fleet. For the first time, a thought forms clearly in his mind. This is not a sacrifice in the traditional sense. It is a calculation. Japan has reached the end of its material strength. Ships are gone, aircraft are gone, fuel is vanishing. What remains is human precision. The ability of a trained pilot to guide an explosive to its target with absolute intent. A man turned into a weapon. Ahead, the horizon begins to glow faintly with smoke. The American fleet. Seki tightens his grip on the controls. Behind him, the decision has already been made. Not just for this mission, but for the future of the war. What begins today over Leyte will not end here. October 25th, 1944. Philippine Sea, east of Leyte. The American fleet moves in layered formation, steel stretching to the horizon. Escort carriers ride low in the water, their decks crowded with aircraft. FM-2 Wildcats, TBM Avengers, being fueled and armed in frantic rhythm. Destroyers cut white wakes along the perimeter, radar antennae turning endlessly, searching the sky. On the bridge of the escort carrier USS St. Lo, lookouts scan the horizon through binoculars, eyes burning from fatigue. The previous days have been relentless. Air attacks, submarine alerts, false alarms that blur together until every shadow feels dangerous. Then the warning comes. Bogies, low altitude, bearing 085. Radar operators lean closer to their scopes. The contacts are faint, too low, too fast, unusual. Fighter direction officers scramble to respond, but the incoming aircraft slip beneath the main radar umbrella, hugging the sea like predators. This is not how Japanese attacks usually look. Yukio Seki sees the fleet before it sees him. The sheer scale of it steals his breath for a moment. Ships everywhere, wakes crisscrossing, smoke drifting lazily upward from boilers and gunfire. It is the most powerful armada ever assembled, and it lies exposed beneath him. Anti-aircraft fire erupts. Black bursts punch the air above the ships. Tracers streak past Seki's canopy, white hot lines flashing by in impossible angles. One aircraft ahead of him explodes midair, disintegrating into smoke and fragments. No one breaks formation. This is not a dogfight. There will be no evasive turns, no disengagement. Seki scans the fleet, searching not for any ship, but for the right one. A carrier, smaller than the fleet carriers, less armored. He spots St. Lo. On the carrier's deck, sailors shout and scatter as alarms scream. A Japanese aircraft dives from the sun, smashing into the flight deck in a ball of fire. Burning fuel pours across the wood planks. Damage control teams rush forward, hoses spraying foam and seawater. Then another aircraft strikes nearby. The crew barely has time to react. Seki lines up his approach. The Zero shudders as flak tears through the wings, but the engine keeps pulling. The carrier's deck grows larger, filling his vision. He can see figures running now. Tiny, frantic shapes. For a split second, his training takes over completely. Adjust trim, correct drift, hold the angle. Then the world becomes white. The Zero slams into the flight deck of St. Lo, the bomb detonating deep inside the ship. The explosion rips through the carrier's interior, igniting stored torpedoes and aviation fuel. A massive secondary blast erupts moments later, lifting the ship's stern clear of the water. Fire engulfs the deck. Smoke billows skyward. Within 30 minutes, St. Lo is sinking. Across the American fleet, stunned silence follows the initial shock. This is not just another air attack. This is something fundamentally different. By nightfall, reports flood into command ships and headquarters. One escort carrier sunk, others damaged, casualties mounting. The pattern is unmistakable. Pilots deliberately crashing into ships, ignoring every chance to escape. The word spreads quickly through the fleet. Kamikaze, divine wind, a term borrowed from legend, now given horrifying modern meaning. Back at Japanese headquarters, confirmation arrives in fragments. Signals intelligence, pilot reports, observations from shore. The reaction is not celebration. It is grim acknowledgement. The tactic works. Not reliably, not efficiently, but enough. One aircraft, one pilot, one ship removed from the battlefield. For a nation bleeding resources, The arithmetic is irresistible. Vice Admiral Onishi receives the news late that evening. He listens without interruption, then closes his eyes. He has crossed a line. What began as an emergency measure, authorized under crushing pressure, has proven viable. And because it has proven viable, it will not stop. Orders are issued. The special attack units are no longer experimental. They are formalized, named, expanded. Airfields across the Philippines begin preparing aircraft not for survival, but for impact. Bomb racks are reinforced. Radios are removed to save weight. Pilots are reassigned. Some volunteer. Many are assigned. Very few refuse. For American sailors, the psychological impact sets in almost immediately. This enemy cannot be frightened away, cannot be outmaneuvered once committed. A kamikaze aircraft does not need to survive the defensive fire. It only needs to reach its target once. Gunners report locking eyes with pilots seconds before impact. Some pilots wave, others do not. Either way, the effect is the same. The war has taken on a new, deeply personal dimension. As the battle for Leyte continues, one truth becomes unavoidable on both sides of the Pacific. Japan has not unleashed kamikaze attacks because it believes they will win the war. It has unleashed them because it no longer sees another way to keep fighting. And now that the weapon exists, now that it has drawn blood, it will demand more lives than anyone involved is ready to admit. The question is no longer whether kamikaze attacks will continue. It is how far Japan is willing to go. November 1944, Tsuchiura Naval Air Base, Honshu, Japan. The wind cuts across the runway, sharp and cold, carrying the smell of fuel and wet earth. Training aircraft circle overhead in uneven patterns, their engines whining as if strained by the very idea of staying aloft. Inside a low wooden briefing hall, young men sit shoulder to shoulder on the floor. Most wear freshly issued uniforms. A few still carry the stiffness of civilians not yet accustomed to military life. They are pilots in name. In reality, they are components in a system being assembled under crushing urgency. A senior flight instructor steps forward. His hair is graying. His voice is calm, precise, professional. You will not be trained for combat in the traditional sense, he says. You will be trained to strike a target. He turns to the chalkboard. A rough outline of a ship is drawn in white. An arrow angles downward toward its deck. 30 degrees, he continues. Too steep, and you lose control. Too shallow, and you are destroyed before impact. There is no discussion of evasive maneuvers. No talk of return flights. The implication hangs in the room, heavy and undeniable. Japan's pilot training program, once among the most demanding in the world, has been gutted by necessity. Before the war, naval aviators trained for years. Only a fraction graduated. Survivors accumulated hundreds of flight hours before seeing combat. Now, fuel shortages have rewritten everything. Training is abbreviated. Flight hours are rationed. Dogfighting tactics are abandoned entirely. There is no time to teach skills that assume survival. Instead, instructors focus on one thing: control under pressure, maintaining speed in a dive, correcting drift, choosing the moment of impact. Ironically, the kamikaze program demands precision at a moment when Japan can least afford it. Among the trainees is Ensign Hiroshi Nishina, 19 years old, a former university student who once studied literature. He has fewer than 100 flight hours. He has never faced enemy fire. Each day, he practices dive runs over painted ship silhouettes laid out on empty fields. After every attempt, instructors critique him closely. You hesitated. Your angle was unstable. You pulled up too early. Hesitation, they remind him, will waste the sacrifice. At night, Nishina writes letters in careful, deliberate handwriting. He writes to his parents about gratitude, to his younger sister about her studies. He avoids specifics, as if naming his fate might make it real. Sometimes, he listens to the distant hum of American bombers passing overhead, unchallenged. It feels like the future flying over him. Ceremonies accompany assignment to special attack units. They are formal, restrained, and deeply symbolic. Pilots receive hachimaki headbands marked with rising suns. Some are given senninbari, belts stitched by women at home for luck. Cups of sake are shared. Photographs are taken. Faces serious, backs straight, eyes forward. Officers speak of honor, of protection, of duty to the homeland. What they do not speak of is fear, yet fear is everywhere. It hides in the silence after ceremonies, in the way pilots linger over their meals, in the careful folding of letters that will be delivered only after death. Refusal remains technically possible, but the cost is social annihilation. To refuse is to shame one's family. To accept survival while others die is to mark oneself as spiritually hollow. So the system moves forward, powered not by fanaticism, but by pressure. By December 1944, the special attack units expand rapidly. The Navy is joined by the Army. Older aircraft are pressed into service. Trainers, Yokosuka K-5Y biplanes, slow and vulnerable, are modified to carry bombs. Even obsolete planes are deemed acceptable, because the calculation has changed. Aircraft no longer need to survive. They only need to reach. Across the Pacific, American commanders analyze the new threat. They recover wreckage, study approach patterns, interview survivors. The conclusion is unsettling. These attacks are not random. They are planned, coordinated, adaptive. Pilots vary approach angles. Some dive steeply from altitude. Others skim the waves until the last possible moment. Fighters act as decoys, drawing defensive fire while the attackers slip through. This is not madness. It is doctrine. As American defenses improve, radar coverage expands, fighter patrols tighten, anti-aircraft fire becomes denser. The success rate of kamikaze attacks begins to decline. Where early missions might see one successful strike for every 5 aircraft launched, later missions see far fewer. The Japanese response is not to reassess, it is to escalate. More pilots, more aircraft, more missions. Lives replace fuel as the expendable resource. Inside Japanese command rooms, unease grows. Vice Admiral Onishi reads after-action reports late into the night. He understands the trajectory. The kamikaze program is not reversing the war. It is slowing it. But slowing feels like action. And action feels better than surrender. So the orders continue. Because to stop now would mean admitting that thousands have already died for nothing. And no leader, no matter how rational, can accept that easily. As winter deepens, both sides sense what is coming next. The Americans push closer to Japan's inner defenses, and Japan prepares to spend lives on a scale that will eclipse everything that came before. The next battlefield will decide whether the kamikaze weapon can truly alter history. Its name is Okinawa. April 6, 1945. Kanoya Air Base, Kyushu. Rain slicks the runway, turning dust into mud and reflecting the glow of runway lamps in trembling streaks of yellow. Engines roar in uneven waves as aircraft line up nose to tail. Fighters, bombers, trainers, anything that can still lift itself into the air. This is not a single mission. It is Kikusui No. 1, Floating Chrysanthemum, the first mass kamikaze offensive against the American invasion fleet off Okinawa. More than 350 aircraft are scheduled to fly today. Inside one cockpit, Ensign Hiroshi Nishina adjusts his harness and stares forward. His hands are steady. His breathing is slow. The training, brief as it was, has done its job. The engine vibrates through his bones. A signal flag drops. The first aircraft surges forward. Then another. Then another. The sky fills with noise and motion as Japan empties what remains of its air power into the clouds. Out at sea, the American fleet braces. Radar screens light up across dozens of ships. Contacts multiply faster than controllers can track them. This is no feint, an officer mutters. Destroyers assigned as radar pickets take station far from the main fleet, fully aware of their role. They are early warning. They are bait. They will take the first hits. And they do. Japanese aircraft burst through cloud cover in scattered formations. Some high, some skimming the waves, some diving almost vertically. Anti-aircraft fire erupts in every direction. 5-inch guns thundering, Bofors cannons hammering, machine guns chattering non-stop. The sky becomes a lattice of smoke, tracer fire, and falling debris. A kamikaze strikes USS Bush, exploding near the bridge. Moments later, another aircraft slams into USS Colquhoun, flames engulfing her decks. Damage control teams fight fires that refuse to die, fed by fuel and shattered ammunition. Some ships are hit once, others twice. A few are hit again before crews can even react. Nishina sees the fleet as a wall of steel and smoke. American fighters slash through the formation, Hellcats ripping apart the slower Japanese aircraft. Nishina ignores them. He has been taught not to evade once committed. Evasion wastes time. Time is distance. Distance is survival. And survival is not the objective. Flak bursts rock his aircraft. The canopy cracks. Wind screams inside the cockpit. He forces the nose down, adjusting by instinct now, not thought. Below him, a destroyer turns hard, guns firing continuously. The deck fills his vision. For a brief instant, he feels an overwhelming clarity. Then there is nothing. By nightfall, the sea around Okinawa is littered with wreckage. American ships burn. Some sink, others limp away, blackened and scarred. Casualty numbers climb into the thousands. And yet the fleet holds. Landing craft continue toward the beaches. Troops keep coming ashore. The invasion does not stop. Back in Japan, reports arrive slowly. Some pilots hit their targets. Most do not. Losses are staggering, far worse than Leyte, but commanders focus on the ships damaged, the fires started, the chaos caused. They tell themselves it is working. They need to believe that. As April turns into May, the attacks continue. Kikusui number 2, number 3, number 4. Each wave smaller than the last. Fuel shortages worsen. Aircraft are launched knowing they may not even reach Okinawa. Pilots ditch into the sea, never found. And still, the orders continue. Because stopping would mean acknowledging that sacrifice alone cannot halt an industrial juggernaut. For American sailors, the psychological toll deepens. Sleep comes in fragments. Every aircraft, friendly or not, is treated as a potential killer until identified. Gunners stay at their posts for hours, eyes burning, ears ringing. Veterans later say the kamikaze attacks were the most exhausting aspect of the war, not because they were the deadliest, but because they could not be deterred. As Okinawa burns, a grim realization settles over both sides. For the Americans, if this is the defense of an outer island, what will Japan do when the homeland itself is threatened? For Japan, even this level of sacrifice is not enough. The kamikaze weapon has reached its greatest test, and it is failing to deliver what its creators hoped. The final phase of the war is approaching, and it will demand answers no amount of courage can provide. In 1945, Chiran Air Base, Kagoshima Prefecture. The base lies quiet in the early morning, surrounded by green fields and low hills that seem untouched by war. Birds circle lazily above the runway. From a distance, it could almost be mistaken for peace. Up close, it is something else entirely. Chiran has become one of the primary departure points for special attack units bound for Okinawa. Aircraft arrive, pilots arrive, aircraft depart. Pilots do not return. Inside a wooden dormitory, Ensign Kiyoshi Ogawa, 20 years old, sits at a narrow desk under a bare light bulb. He writes slowly, carefully, choosing each word as if it might be weighed later by someone he loves. To father and mother, he begins. He does not write about fear. He does not write about orders. He writes about gratitude, about cherry blossoms he remembers from school trips, about how proud he is to have been raised as their son. When he finishes, he folds the letter neatly and places it with the others stacked beside the door. Dozens of envelopes waiting to be delivered after missions are completed. Ogawa exhales and rubs his eyes. Outside, laughter drifts across the yard. It is not hysteria. It is young men trying to hold on to something human for a few hours longer. Later myths will claim the kamikaze pilots were eager for death. The records tell a different story. Surviving diaries and letters reveal men who understood exactly what awaited them, and struggled with it quietly. They wrote of obligation, of pressure, of shame at the thought of surviving while others died. One pilot wrote, "I do not wish to die, but I cannot bear the thought that my life would be spared while others give theirs." Another wrote, "If my death delays the enemy even one day, perhaps my younger brother will not have to fight." This was not fanaticism. It was moral compression. Choices narrowed until refusal felt worse than death. Commanders were acutely aware of this tension. Pre-flight briefings were deliberately short. No speeches, no emotional appeals, just weather, course headings, estimated enemy defenses. The absence of drama was intentional. Too much emotion might crack the calm required to fly straight into gunfire. When Ogawa's turn comes, He walks to his aircraft without ceremony. It is a Nakajima Kai-43 Hayabusa. Light, fragile, obsolete by 1945 standards. Mechanics have reinforced the engine mounts and checked the bomb release mechanism, though there will be no release. A crew chief bows deeply. "Good luck," he says, not goodbye. Good luck implies possibility, however theoretical. Ogawa climbs into the cockpit, straps in, and starts the engine. The vibration settles into his chest like a second heartbeat. As he taxis toward the runway, villagers line the road beyond the base fence. Women, elderly men, children lifted onto shoulders. Some wave small flags. Some wipe their eyes. The pilots wave back. Not because they believe the gesture matters, because not waving would feel cruel. In the air, the formation climbs slowly, conserving fuel. The distance to Okinawa is long. Many pilots will never reach the fleet. American fighters are already airborne. Ogawa flies in silence, eyes fixed forward. He does not think about ideology. He thinks about angles, about holding speed, about not hesitating when the time comes. And somewhere beneath those thoughts, another question presses quietly. Will this change anything? Across the sea, American sailors brace once more. They have learned the patterns. Low approaches, sudden dives, aircraft that do not turn away even when riddled with bullets. Every approaching plane becomes a threat until proven otherwise. Gunners describe the moment of realization, the instant when they know the aircraft is not trying to escape. Some veterans later say that was the worst part. Not the explosion, the certainty. By June 1945, Japanese losses have reached catastrophic levels. Thousands of aircraft destroyed. Thousands of pilots dead. The American fleet is battered, but still advancing. Inside Japan's leadership, the truth is unavoidable. Even total sacrifice cannot reverse the war. Yet the Kamikaze program continues, because stopping would force leaders to confront the meaning of everything that has already been done. As Okinawa finally falls, the last defensive buffer is gone. The homeland lies exposed. Plans for even larger kamikaze operations are drafted on paper. Thousands of aircraft, waves beyond anything seen before. But the reality underneath those plans is crumbling. Fuel does not exist. Aircraft do not exist. Pilots do not exist. And soon, a weapon will arrive that no pilot, no matter how determined, can stop. The kamikaze strategy is approaching its end. Not because Japan chooses to abandon it, but because history is about to make it irrelevant. July 1945, Tokyo. The capital moves through its days like a city holding its breath. Entire districts lie flattened from months of incendiary raids. Charred timbers protrude from the earth like broken ribs. Yet trams still run on partially repaired lines. People still queue for rice. Government offices still open their doors each morning. Even as the war grinds toward an ending, no one will speak aloud. Inside the Imperial Navy Ministry, the air is stale and heavy. Maps cover the walls, layered with grease pencil markings and pins. Red circles, American airfields, American fleets, press ever closer. Blue circles, Japan's remaining bases, are fewer now. Many crossed out or annotated with notes that read simply, "Fuel unavailable." The kamikaze program still exists, but it exists mostly on paper. Fuel reserves are nearly gone. Aircraft production has collapsed under bombing and material shortages. Training units report that new pilots cannot even complete basic navigation exercises reliably. Some barely know how to recover from a stall. And yet, planning continues. Folders marked Ketsugo, Operation Decisive Defense, are passed across tables. They outline the final stand, massed kamikaze attacks against an allied invasion of the Japanese home islands. Thousands of aircraft, endless waves, a last storm meant to shatter American resolve. On paper, it looks formidable. In reality, it is a wish written in ink. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi sits alone in his office late into the night, long after his staff has gone. He reads casualty lists slowly, carefully, as if by reading them with enough attention he might somehow honor the dead. Names blur together. Young men. Very young men. Pilots who never reached Okinawa. Pilots who struck ships and vanished in fire. Pilots lost to mechanical failure before ever seeing the enemy. Onishi understands now what he could not allow himself to accept earlier. The kamikaze attacks did not fail because the pilots lacked courage. They failed because courage cannot overcome industrial imbalance. America produces aircraft faster than Japan can train pilots, ships faster than Japan can sink them, fuel faster than Japan can burn it. Japan has turned human beings into weapons because everything else is gone. And even that is no longer enough. On August 6th, 1945, a single American bomber appears over Hiroshima. At first, the reports reaching Tokyo are confused. A new type of bomb. A city destroyed in an instant. Communications severed. Fire beyond anything previously seen. Military leaders argue over the meaning of it. 3 days later, Nagasaki. Then, word arrives that the Soviet Union has entered the war, crushing the last hope that Moscow might broker a negotiated peace. In a matter of days, the entire strategic framework collapses. The kamikaze strategy, so extreme, so costly, has been rendered obsolete overnight. No aircraft can intercept this weapon. No sacrifice can delay it. On August 15th, 1945, Emperor Hirohito addresses the nation by radio. Many citizens hear his voice for the first time. His language is formal, restrained, almost abstract, but the meaning is unmistakable. Japan will surrender. Across airfields, pilots gather in silence. Some weep openly. Some stare at the ground. Others feel a confusing mix of relief and guilt. Relief that they will live, guilt that others did not. At Chiran, at Kanoya, at dozens of other bases, aircraft sit motionless on the tarmac. Bombs remain attached. Missions remain unwritten. The war is over, but the weight of what was done does not lift with the announcement. The following day, August 16th, 1945, Vice Admiral Onishi commits seppuku. He leaves no apology, no justification. Those who knew him understand without explanation. For him, survival would have meant living alongside the knowledge of the lives he ordered spent, without having achieved the salvation he promised himself they might buy. In the years that follow, the world struggles to understand the kamikaze. Simplified explanations take hold. They were fanatics. They were brainwashed. They wanted to die. The truth is more uncomfortable. They were pilots trapped inside a collapsing system, trained to serve a nation that had exhausted every other option, ordered to become weapons because nothing else remained. They did not die because Japan valued death. They died because Japan had run out of ways to fight without it. The kamikaze program was not the cause of Japan's defeat. It was the evidence of it. A strategy born not from ideology, but from desperation. Not from madness, but from arithmetic. When machines failed, Japan turned to men. And when men failed to change the outcome, the war revealed a final, unforgiving truth. In modern war, courage alone is never enough. Late August 1945, Chiran Air Base, Kagoshima. The airfield is unnaturally quiet. Where engines once roared every morning, there is now only wind moving through tall grass along the runway's edge. Aircraft sit in rows, untouched, paint-chipped, tires slowly deflating. Bombs remain bolted beneath fuselages, not because anyone plans to use them, but because no one has yet decided what to do with them. Former kamikaze pilots walk among the planes in silence. Some run their hands along the wings. Others avoid looking at the aircraft altogether. These machines were meant to be their coffins. Now, they are relics. Evidence of a future that never happened. One pilot, barely 20, stands staring at the horizon. He had been scheduled to fly within days of the surrender. His name had already been added to the list. His letters already written. Now he is alive. And he does not know what to do with that fact. Across Japan, the same silence spreads. The war ends not with explosions, but with emptiness, with unanswered questions, with the unbearable task of accounting for the dead. Families receive final letters weeks late. Some never receive anything at all. Names are carved into memorials. Photographs are framed and placed on household altars. For many, there is no grave, only absence. American sailors return home carrying their own memories. They remember the sound of engines diving out of the sky, the moment of realization when an aircraft did not turn away, the instant between recognition and impact. Some feel anger, some feel sorrow, some feel both at once. Years later, when asked about the kamikaze, many struggled to explain the fear. Not because it was greater than other dangers, but because it was different. It was intentional. In the post-war world, narratives harden. Kamikaze pilots are portrayed as fanatics, symbols of blind obedience or cultural extremism. The story becomes simple, comfortable, but historians digging through letters, diaries, and military records uncover a more troubling reality. These were not men who sought death. They were men whose choices were stripped away one by one until death was framed as the least dishonorable option remaining. They lived inside a system that collapsed around them, one that substituted sacrifice for strategy, symbolism for logistics, hope for mathematics. Vice Admiral Onishi's decision echoes through history not because it was uniquely cruel, but because it was tragically logical within the context of defeat. When Japan lost control of the air, when it lost its fleet, when it lost fuel, industry, and time, the kamikaze program emerged not as a first resort, but as the last one, a final attempt to impose cost where victory was no longer possible. The true secret of the kamikaze is not how pilots were convinced to die. It is why leaders believed there was nothing else left to try. Modern war does not forgive imbalance. It does not pause for valor. It does not reward sacrifice if sacrifice cannot be converted into sustained power. Japan learned that lesson at the cost of thousands of young lives. Leaves that did not fail. Strategies did. Today, at Chiran, a small museum stands near the old runway. Inside are photographs, letters, uniforms neatly preserved, faces frozen in time, serious, young, unmistakably human. Visitors often leave in silence, not because the story glorifies death, but because it strips away easy explanations. The kamikaze were not a weapon born of madness. They were a weapon born of collapse. And their legacy remains a warning written in human lives. When nations run out of options, it is people who pay the price.